There are a number of annuities available at retirement. In fact, my only experience with annuities is when my parents needed to make this decision. And it was interesting to me how each of their situations were different, and the thinking behind each of their decisions, therefore, was different too. How do you justify each option? What are the potential benefits of combining different annuities? Can this achieve optimal retirement outcomes for retirees? And these types of questions really came up in our household. So what I've done is I've invited Hugh Hacking, Executive of Structured Investments and Annuities at Momentum Corporate, to join me today to unpack some of these questions. Welcome to EBnet.Stream, Hugh.
Thank you, Natalie. Thank you for welcoming me. And I think that's a very appropriate introduction that you gave there around the complexities of annuities. And it's nice to be here today.
Welcome. Let's jump right into it. What is an annuity and why does it matter to retirees?
Well, most simplistically, an annuity is just a mechanism where, so as you know, before you retire, you basically put money away and it accumulates into some sort of an amount, a lump sum. An annuity is a mechanism where you take that amount of money and it then converts it into a regular income that gets paid out. And there are different forms of annuities, which we can get into. But simplistically, it's just taking a lump sum of money and turning it into a regular income.
Great. And that is a very simplistic explanation, because if I look at my parents, they made two different decisions. One,
Yes.
in fact, took a living annuity and one took a life annuity. I
Correct.
wonder if you could perhaps chat about the differences between those two.
Sure. So effectively, the two main categories of annuity are living annuities and life annuities. Now, I'll start with life annuities. What a life annuity effectively is a vehicle that's offered by an insurance company. It takes that lump sum of yours, and in return, the insurance company says, I will pay you a guaranteed income for the rest of your life. So in other words, until you die, no matter what happens, I will pay according to the contractual terms, I will pay that income to you. And in fact, it's possible to add a second life to that as well, for example, a spouse, so that it will then pay either at the full level or potentially a percentage of the previous amount that was paid monthly. It will pay to the spouse until your spouse also dies. So that's essentially what a life annuity does. And there are different variants of those that have different profiles in terms of how they have increases done. And so you might find at the one extreme, there's what's called a level annuity, which never provides any increases in the income. And then at the other extreme, you have what's called a CPI linked annuity, which will increase the actual amount that is paid to you monthly by CPI each year at guaranteed to increase by CPI. So that's a life annuity. So they basically will pay you an income for life. A living annuity is a little different. What happens is you start off with an amount of money and it's invested in a portfolio, typically a balanced type portfolio. It's invested, and then you select a drawdown rate between 2% and 17.5% per annum. And you will then get that amount. The annual amount is divided into 12 and it's paid to you each month. Next year, you can change the drawdown rate again. The big difference between a living annuity and a life annuity is that it's not guaranteed to last for the rest of your life. So in other words, if you start off, let's say with 100,000 Rand and you start drawing it down, potentially you will run out of money at some point before you die. So typically if you live till you're quite old, the likelihood of running out of money is quite high unless you take a very low drawdown rate. So the higher the drawdown rate, the more quickly the money will run out, the lower, the longer it will last. And so this is important to bear in mind that you're trading security for potentially some flexibility in terms of what you can draw down. There are some other differences as well. So one of the things that typically attracts people to living annuities is that when you die, the residual balance is paid out to your beneficiaries or heirs, right? Whereas with a life annuity, unless you have purchased what's called a guaranteed option, which means that if you die within the period of the guaranteed option, it will pay out a residual value. but otherwise there's no payout to beneficiaries or heirs at all. And so that often swings people's decision making in terms of what they decide to do, you know, depending on their own health, their own expectation about longevity, the dependents that they have, et cetera, et cetera. So people make these decisions. Another big decision point is also for people to decide what sort of starting income they want, how much flexibility they need, et cetera.
Right. And so each of these have different pros and obviously
Yes,
subsequently cons.
absolutely.
And I kind of hear in the market a lot of talk around blended annuities.
Yes.
Can you perhaps share a little bit more about that?
I can. In fact, there's two ways of doing that. The one is that now the regulations were amended some time ago, which allow you to use your retirement lump sum to purchase more than one annuity. So you can, in fact, purchase an annuity of one type with some of the money and an annuity of a different type with some of the money. Um, the other way of doing it is there are packaged products which are made available, so-called hybrid annuities, where they mix these two within a single package. Um, the advantage of the package option is that it often makes the calculations and the projections simpler to look at, and it's all in one place. But obviously, the looking at separate packages, you can mix and match and do things with more flexibility in some senses. Now, the advantage of a hybrid or blended annuity is that you can get the best of both worlds in some sense. So, for example, you could purchase a life annuity that takes care of your minimum spending requirement, absolute minimum. And you know that for the rest of your life, you will have that minimum level of spending taken care of, and you will always get some income out that's paid to you monthly. You'll never run out of money completely. Whereas then using a living annuity for the balance allows you some level of flexibility, perhaps. So maybe, 10 years from retirement, you suddenly find that there's bigger than usual expenses. Need to maybe purchase a car, you need to do something else, or your medical expenses, whatever. You can increase at that point your drawdown rate so that you draw down higher levels of income for a period of time, and knowing that it reduces the time that those assets will last, but it allows you that flexibility to change your income drawdown at some future date. So it provides that sort of benefit. And so it often helps to then make sure that you're not locked into one type of solution, but that you can make some changes over time. It is complicated to do though, and it's not something that one should do just, with some guesswork or speaking to your friends at a braai. It does typically require um, quite sophisticated modeling by suitably qualified financial advisors to be able to assist you with that type of decision.
So you've hit on such an interesting point there, and that's the value of a financial advisor in a decision
Yes.
like this. If I was wanting to blend or kind of set up this hybrid annuity structure, could I have it in any proportion, or do I have to do it 50-50, or are there any set rules around that?
No, you can do it in any proportion, subject to there are some rules around the minimums that you can invest into
Mm.
certain annuities. And so, what you also don't want to do is you don't want to buy your 20 favorite annuities. That's going to be probably quite expensive, from a fee perspective, but also it's going to be quite confusing and so on. So you do want to typically limit what you're doing to maybe say two annuities, one of one type, one of a different type. But the proportions are not predetermined, and often that's where the modeling comes in, is to look at what is the optimal proportion to put into which type of annuity and how much you want to put there. And so, for example, putting a component into a life annuity in a hybrid annuity can prolong the sort of the sustainability of your living annuity, that sort of thing. And those are complicated modeling decisions that need to be made.
Right, right. Not something that we can ask ChatGPT to do.
No, it typically takes bespoke tools that financial advisors that can do this would have access to be able to make those projections.
Mm. A question I've always wanted to ask someone when it comes to annuities is there a set time that I have to receive my income? For example, does it have to be paid monthly, Or could I select to have an annual payment, or could I defer my payments?
So deferring is not an option with the payments. So typically, we don't have any deferred life annuities available in this country, and we also don't have deferred living annuities. So the best you can do if you want to defer is to take a living annuity with a minimum drawdown rate of 2%. There are, in some cases, it is possible to have different payment schedules, and some providers will make quarterly payments available, but it's few and far between. I mean, typically by far the most common approach is a monthly payment that gets made, and effectively you may, if you don't need the money every month, put it in just a normal bank account until you do need it. But I mean, typically once you annuitize, you are locked into a fairly periodic schedule of monthly payments that comes out of the annuity.
Mm. An interesting question now after the recent interest rate cuts.
Yes,
So interest rates are changing, right? I mean,
yes.
finally they're going in the right direction for people with debt like me. But what is the role of interest rates when it comes to the annuity that I might decide on?
Well, I'm glad that you said that they're moving in the right direction for people with debt, because that's an important qualification, because interest rates have mixed impacts in different circumstances. So yes, if you owe people money, you have a bond, car loan, whatever it is, interest rates are painful, and typically we consider higher interest rates as painful for that very reason. But in fact, if you're about to make a decision to actually purchase an annuity, high interest rates mean that your annuity is cheaper in inverted commas, and I'll explain what I mean by cheaper, because insurers effectively purchase bonds which pay interest, which are linked to the interest rate levels, to effectively invest into, so that they can pay out your annuity over time. And prevailing bond rates have a dramatic impact in terms of what the starting income is that you can get from your annuity. So when I say it's cheaper, it means that for the same amount of money, you will get a higher starting income than when bond rates are lower. And so certain types of annuities are more sensitive to interest rates. So guaranteed life annuities typically are more sensitive. There's one type of life annuity called a with profit annuity that I can talk about a bit more, that is less sensitive because it uses a mix of equity in the growth portfolio and other investment types, not just bonds. And then living annuities are less sensitive as well. But so, yes, when interest rates were high recently, we would have seen that it was a great time to buy a guaranteed annuity that pays out a guaranteed amount of money for the rest of your life, because they would have high starting incomes, and interest rates were high, so that was working. But now, as interest rates are coming down, we can expect that the starting incomes for those annuities will reduce, and it may, at that point in time, make more sense than to start looking at other annuity options, for example, with profit annuities or even living annuities, just depending on one's personal circumstances.
Okay, so it does get rather complicated, and I guess
It does.
the date that you retire has actually quite a big impact when it comes to the income that you can enjoy in that retirement. Um,
Absolutely.
and speaking of timing, I think one of the interesting things for retirement fund trustees is after the default regulations and the insistence on retirement benefit counseling, when is the most appropriate time to actually engage the membership of a retirement fund to actually start talking to them about their annuity choices, and when they should start aligning their in-fund investments to possibly look at matching what they're going to do when they retire and they leave the fund?
That's a very difficult question to answer, Natalie. And in fact, there isn't really a right answer to that. I would typically say that the earlier that people become aware of the fact that they will be retiring, and they start thinking around maximizing their savings, changing their own financial profile so that they don't enter retirement with a lot of debt, etc. That's important, right? So it it doesn't take 2 months to sort out all of your debt, for example. You want to make sure that by the time you get to retirement, you have minimum levels of debt. That takes some time. And so what you find, many retirement benefit counselors will contact members as far out as 5 years from retirement. And that's not a bad thing. And in fact, one can argue that sometimes one should even be thinking about it even earlier than that. But certainly 5 years out, you need to start thinking about some of the decisions that you need to make around retirement, and then, planning for it. As you then get closer to retirement, you will then start having to think about specifically annuity choices and so on. And those are probably decisions you start making 2 years out, probably by a year out. You should have a pretty good idea of what you are going to do, so that by the time you actually do retire, that you essentially have everything in place to make the right decision. Leaving it till the last minute is probably not the best idea, because you can't make the necessary changes at that point to satisfy what you need to do.
Thank you, Hugh. I think with compulsory preservation of your retirement pot now enforced, everyone's going to have to choose a post-retirement annuity strategy. So this is a conversation that we need to keep having, and making sure that our retirement fund members understand their options. But most importantly, understand the consequences of the choices that they make. And like you rightly say, if you leave it for the last minute, you're still making decisions. Perhaps you're just not aware you're making decisions.
No, that's right. No, I mean, actually, look, it's easy for me to say I'm in the employee benefits industry, I'm in the retirement business. So it's easy to sound all intelligent and clever, and to tell people, oh, you should start thinking about saving from the day you start working. I mean, obviously, there are a lot of practicalities in people's lives, and it's difficult these days, to make ends meet, and we've all got commitments like children at schools or other financial commitments. So, retirement savings is a challenge for people, but it is important. And certainly as you get closer to retirement, it's important to make sure that you do really pay attention to what will happen the day you retire.
Thank you, Hugh. Thank you for sharing your experience with us on EBnet.Stream today.
No, it's a pleasure. I really enjoyed being here. Thank you.
Okay.